There's absolutely no comparison between the congregational singing in this setting and where we had been before. And it is rich. Can you feel that? I mean, thank you, because it takes all of us to do it. And a very good accompanist, too. Yes, it does. Well, friends, this strange day we call Palm Sunday is upon us again. Seems like a very odd time to have a parade right in the middle of Lent. Children waving palm branches and adults singing hosannas, and everybody seems kind of giddy about a parade. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, those 40 days of Lent were kind of heavy and somber, and they seemed very serious. It was a time of self-denial for many people, giving up even something important for a period of time. It was a sober time of reflection and introspection, kind of like Christian piety with the curtains drawn. We didn't advertise it much, but it was going on. We knew that this was the build-up, all these 40 days of Lent, not counting Sundays, for Holy Week. The events of Holy Week, with Jesus being harried by enemies and detractors, the Last Supper in that upper room, the betrayal of Jesus and his arrest, the trials and the mistreatment at the hands of the Romans, and then that cross of death between two criminals. That's the end of Holy Week, and it begins with a parade, a festive parade. The hymns we sing are more uplifting than you'd think would be proper for Lent. It seems like a reprieve of sort before we plunge again into the stark look at the brutality that human beings can do to other human beings. In some traditions, they don't call this Palm Sunday, they call it Passion Sunday. Passion Sunday. And that really seems to be a bit more appropriate, this setting for the Jesus story. So let's see what we can learn from Parade Day that might have some application for our own lives. As you read the story, it seems like a parade gone wrong. It starts out with some logistic challenges, some beasts to carry the principal character, Jesus, on this trip into Jerusalem. The logistic problem is quickly solved by commissioning a colt, a young horse, as we see it in Luke's gospel. In both Matthew and John, it's a donkey. Doesn't seem to make much difference. They set out to enter the capital city of Jerusalem, which was the center of political power, being represented by the Romans who controlled things. It was also the center of religious power, being vested in the high priest Caiaphas. There's something about a parade that fascinates us, that carries us along even when we don't know whose parade it is or where it's going. This parade does not seem to be overly organized or planned. It's more impromptu and spontaneous. And so Jesus comes into Jerusalem surrounded by the curious and a few of the committed, and makes his way into this troublesome place. Of course, it is very important for both religious leaders and political leaders to always know what's going on. Always be aware of their surroundings. To know what's happening that is unusual, anything that could be considered a challenge or a threat, something that would disturb the status quo. For people who are in power love the status quo. They love the way it is. And even small things, if they go unchallenged, could develop into larger things, undesirable things. Better to know what's going on sooner than later. And so undoubtedly the Romans and the chief priests and scribes were troubled by what was going on that parade. People were saying awful things, challenging things like, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." Certainly the Romans weren't going to be pleased with this talk about enthusiasm for a king. That would sound like treason. King seems to be a challenge to the emperor Tiberius. That can't be ignored. Word would get back to the Romans something bad was happening. And the priestly hierarchy would also be offended by claiming that this Jesus was coming in the name of the Lord. They hadn't given permission for Jesus to be acting in the name of the Lord, as if the parade had some kind of divine approval. They hadn't given it. Even peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven may sound innocent enough, but something's going on here. Something that needs watching. That's what the authorities would have said. I preached a lot of Palm Sunday sermons, and some I regret. The ones I regret are the ones in which I tried to make a point about, aren't those people on that first Palm Sunday a fickle bunch? Fickle bunch because here they are on Sunday making this big impromptu parade, a joyous thing, and they're waving their palm branches and saying Hosanna and all that kind of thing. And just 4 days later, they're going to be asking for Jesus to be crucified. What a fickle bunch. And the point of the sermon was to say to the congregation, I hope you're not as fickle as those people were. But that was my mistake. For I was wrong about the Palm Sunday people, as I was wrong about the Good Friday people. As I see it, it was the common folk who gladly welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem that day, the folks at the bottom, the folks who didn't count. It was those people who continued to be loyal to Jesus all through his ministry, for he seemed to have connected with them. He talked about how important they were. Just one lost sheep. They could have been that one lost sheep, but God reaches out for the one lost sheep. So they must be important too. So it was the marginalized people who were the real fervent, committed followers of Jesus. If you look at the accounts of what happened on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of Holy Week, you will see pictures of Jesus confronting the religious and the political authorities and getting away with his audacity. Comes on Sunday, and for the next 4 days he gets a free ride. The reason was the support of these common people who surrounded him and in effect protected him. There are four quotes from Mark's Gospel that give us clues to the power of the Palm Sunday crowd to provide a protective space around Jesus during those first days of Holy Week. First one is from Mark's Gospel. When the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him because the whole crowd was spellbound by his teaching. The second one, they, the religious leaders, were afraid of the crowd. Third one, when they realized that he had told this parable against them, they wanted to arrest him, but they feared the crowd. So they left him and went away. And the fourth one, it was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, for they said, not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people. 4 times, protect Jesus, protect Jesus. Strange how dangerous Jesus was to the authorities. This one who taught parables about lost sheep. But Jesus was also talking about making God and only God the center of our lives, above all other pretenders, all political alliances, all religious practices, all economic systems. God is number one. So they arrested Jesus at night with the help of Judas, the disciple traitor. And once they had him in custody, they sentenced him to death. And they did so in Pilate's courtyard, which was Roman territory, where only a few would be allowed to enter, those who would be trusted by Rome to do Rome's bidding. It was not the Palm Sunday crowd that called for his crucifixion. It was those hand-picked Roman lackeys. They were the ones who cried out, "Set Barabbas, the criminal, free. Crucify Jesus. He's the troublemaker." So finally, the Palm Sunday crowd could not protect Jesus while they slept. The enemies of Jesus, those who wanted to silence Jesus, those who showed God's very self to us, they had their way. It took a Roman governor by the name of Pilate and an aristocratic high priest by the name of Caiaphas, and finally a turncoat disciple by the name of Judas, to effect the execution of Jesus. Well, the good people, the good earth people, slept. So what's the lesson in all this for us? Well, I think that the good news is that the gospel good news is for everyone, yet it tends to be better news for those who are on the edges, those who are on the fringes, those who don't have it all worked out yet and have risen to the top, those who don't call the shots and don't make the rules. It seems that every political system, every economic structure or scheme stands under the judgment of God for a better way in which everybody is treated well. And all religious practices and every religious tradition are at best approximations of God's best intent for us. Those who command power and authority tend to like it very much. And they want to keep it that way. It is serving their best interests. And those who have that kind of power and authority and status, they soon begin thinking that's their divine right. They have it coming. They may not have earned it, they may have inherited it, or they may have it by dint of particular advantages, but now it becomes divine right. As the Catholic Church has said for a long time, God seems to have a bias for the poor. A bias for those who are on the edges, the ones who hear God's good news gladly, for it offers them hope and dignity and promise. The Palm Sunday crowd had enthusiasm and hope for a better day, but they didn't have much power. Power was vested up to those up at the top. And for 3 days at the end of this week, those vested with power at the top had their way. But you know, Easter Sunday is coming. Count on it. Easter Sunday is coming, thank God, when the power of God will overcome worldly power. The high priest and Pilate from the Romans thought they had won, that Jesus was safely dead, and their favored status quo was secure again. But God upset all of that. God rolled away a stone, which was the way God signaled a new beginning. Next Sunday, we celebrate the new beginning. So was Palm Sunday a parade gone wrong? Perhaps. But I think the people who participated in the parade had it right. When they were saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." Sounds to me a little bit like what happened at the birth of Jesus. God's announcement to those scruffy shepherds that a new thing was happening. Time to pay attention. A new beginning is about to commence. And so as we make our way through the rest of this week, we pray that God's interventions and God's grace will challenge us and maybe even change us so that again Jesus can become the center of our lives. The only place he really wants to be the center of our lives. Amen.